What's up, my weirdo friend? Is freedom of speech important to you? It's important to me. That's why I'm bringing you this video version of my podcast. Now, I never put my podcasts out on this platform, but this is the most important podcast I've ever done because it's about helping you and I crusade for our freedom of speech. It's being infringed on. So very quickly, before I introduce my guest, Brian Rose, we'll switch to the video version of the podcast in a second, but I got censored on YouTube and it didn't feel good. And I realized, man, I'm waking up to how prevalent censorship is, one of our prime civil liberties. So I thought, who is leading the charge, the premier pioneer in the world leading the charge against censorship and crusading for freedom of speech? And it's Brian Rose of London Real. So I reached out to him to bring him onto my podcast, to bring him to you so you can help join the movement of making a difference in keeping our freedom of speech and fighting censorship. So Brian Rose is going to deliver the goods. He's going to share his story. He's been the most censored person on social media, but he's not laying down. He is fighting back, and I wanted him to teach you and I what we can do to help fight back, because he's been at it for many months against the giants that are censoring speech. But briefly, I want to share with you something that Brian has said many times, and I agree with. He said, "I may not agree with everything you have to say, but I will fight to the death to defend your right to say it." That's what Brian Rose stands for. I love that. So Brian Rose, he is the creator of London Real. They have an enormous YouTube channel, about 2 million subscribers, huge podcast. And without further ado, I am gonna flip over to the podcast with this wonderful human warrior, Brian Rose. Please enjoy. Well, Brian, thank you for being here, brother. I wanna share with you, last week I got censored on YouTube and it didn't feel good. And I've been following your story I've been following you for years, but certainly how you've been censored. I've been following every detail of it for the past several months. And when I took my story to my audience on social media, which is a really interesting paradox, talking about being censored on social media, it doesn't feel like a free platform. But nonetheless, I shared my story on my social media, and my audience, I was shocked how passionate my audience was on this issue of free speech. My Facebook post alone got 3.5 million organic reach. And in the strange times we live in, you can't post anything without there being a division in the audience. But this was the one thing I saw no division on. And I just saw this, everybody asking, JP, this is terrible, what's going on? What can we do? I didn't really know. That's why I immediately thought, I gotta reach out to Brian Rose. You, in my opinion, are the pioneer of leading the charge against censorship on the digital platforms. So just as we break into that, first off, thank you for being here, because you were the one guy I'm like, I and my audience, we need to hear where you've been, what you've learned, what we can do. And I just want to throw this at you in the beginning. I've heard you say many times, and I get goosebumps each time I hear you say it. I might not agree with everything you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Why are you willing to stand up for even people being able to speak their minds when you disagree with them?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And first of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this. I got your email and I think I responded about 6 hours later, just because I appreciate what you do. Actually, you have a great way of using humor and satire to make really important points. And I'm not actually great at comedy, but it's something I always wanted to try because I think it can be actually a better way to make a point sometimes than being super serious. I'm more on the serious and intense side. So I really appreciate what you do. I just wanted to say that.
Brother.
Look, let's put everything in context, maybe to start off. I mean, I've been broadcasting for 9 years. I've been having long form conversations before it was cool to do. When I first started off, everyone said it was too long. A few years later, they said it was too short, and so I've watched this whole evolution of long form content for the past 9 years. And we've always been a platform for free speech. We've always brought people on with differing views. And I've sat in this chair. Mainly my job is to shut up, really, and listen. And I've had people that I've strongly disagreed with that over the years I've actually agreed with, and vice versa. I've had people that I've started off agreeing with, and then later I think they're wrong. And it's shown me that it's important to entertain other points of view, and not just to attack them and vilify them and talk over them, which is kind of what's in our popular culture to do right now, and to categorize them, and it's your team versus my team. And I can think of the guests that have literally changed my life because I was open-minded enough to listen to them. And that could be Dan Pena, the $1 trillion man, who I thought was some type of Bond villain when he came on my show. This guy's got a castle in Scotland. He wears a 3-piece suit. He used to be in the oil business. He's like a ruthless businessman. I didn't like his vibe, but he ended up changing my life. I had Mantak Chia on here talking about sexual energy and massaging your organs. In the chair, he made me really uncomfortable with my Puritan American background. But later I realized this guy really understood the body better than medical doctors. And it goes on and on. I've had Rose McGowan here, who kicked off the Me Too movement, giving her point of view. I've had people from the left, people from the right. So it's something we were doing. And be honest with you, JP, nobody was paying too much attention until almost exactly 4 months ago, when I was doing what I normally do here. I had someone in the studio. We were broadcasting a long form conversation, unscripted, unedited, uncensored, as normal. And it happened to be a guy named David Icke, who's known for some conspiracy theories, who, again, I didn't necessarily want on the show a few years ago, but finally I acquiesced, and I thought, you know what, maybe I can learn something from this guy. And every single time I had him on, the more I thought, man, this guy is speaking a lot of truth. Okay, a little crazy, but a lot of truth too. And so we had him on for, I think, the 3rd time on the show. And it ended up, no, the 4th time. It was April 6th. It ended up being the 2nd largest YouTube live stream in the world that day, second only to President Trump's coronavirus briefing that day. And it was so big, based on the previous live stream, we figured this episode was going to go on to be watched 30 or 40 million times, which would have made it the biggest video podcast in history, just above like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk numbers, based on the number of concurrent viewers versus the previous stream we did with him that had just gotten 10 million views. It was 4x the live stream. So I'm not crazy by thinking this would have gone to 40 million. And we were sitting out there in the offices, kind of basking in the glow. It was a great conversation. And one of my guys said, it's just been deleted from YouTube. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I've never had a video deleted and banned from YouTube. And my initial reaction, and Alex Jones asked me this from InfoWars, he said, Brian, how did you know to fight back? My initial reaction was, fuck that. That's just, it's just wrong, and maybe it's because I grew up in America where freedom of speech is, I think, just in the DNA. And I thought, that's not right. So my initial reaction was to re-upload it and to start doing vlogs and saying, this is bullshit. And my initial reaction was, there's something wrong about this. This is a 68-year-old man sitting in a leather chair, speaking calmly, not asking for revolution, destruction of property, overthrows of governments, just putting out some ideas that you as an adult with the sovereignty of your own body can choose to accept or not. And that was being denied on this platform that it seems to embody freedom of speech. It just seemed completely wrong to me. So I had this visceral reaction of, no, this is not happening. So we fought back, and that's been our story the last 4 months.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad you got censored, because I love what's been awakened in you. It's just like you've got this embodied warrior spirit. And you're a guy, you have, I believe, 1.9 million subscribers on YouTube. You've built a great business that stems from your presence on YouTube. you have a lot to lose. I mean, being deplatformed on YouTube is a real risk for you, but you didn't lay down. You have not chosen to take the safe route of like, cool, you did, sorry, thank you for censoring me for everybody's protection. Let me keep my online empire, like, the money, the followers. No, something woken up in you that stands for something far beyond you in your business.
Yeah.
And what is that? And what are you really crusading for now?
Well, it's interesting because we have graduation ceremonies here every quarter where all the students from our London Real Academy, they fly from around the world for this graduation weekend we do. It's free and people come from like almost every continent, and I do a master class out there, and I tell them, I say every morning I wake up and after I meditate, I pray to the only gods I know, which are YouTube and iTunes. And because I say 95% of our business comes from basically YouTube. It's where all my awareness comes from. It's where all my website traffic comes from. It's where all my leads come from that generate the business for our academy that allows us to do this. That's it. I don't have any advertisers. I don't have any sponsors. So, and I had another guy, funny enough, on the show named Rick Sheffrin, I think it was. And he said, Brian, have you ever realized that this is a massive risk for you? If there's ever a problem, you're totally, you're done. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So yeah, it's a big thing. But at the same point, and I was like, I still was so viscerally against this thing that I thought, you know what, we're just going to go head to head with these guys. And I didn't think we would be deplatformed at first. And that's why I kept uploading the same video over and over again. And the next day, I still hadn't talked to my YouTube rep. And the BBC released an article that basically said, we saw the Ike episode and we forced YouTube to shut these guys down. And I was really irritated because YouTube commented to the BBC, and I was really irritated. They wouldn't call me first, but they spoke to the press. And I remember talking to my rep and I'm being like, this is just massively disrespectful. I've been down to headquarters. We probably made you guys millions of dollars in advertising revenue, and I don't get a phone call. And we kind of went head to head the next couple of weeks, and it soon became clear that they were going to potentially deplatform us. And that's when it got really real, because 8,000 videos, 9 years, 250 million views. And I know it's changed people's lives. I mean, I get people on the street saying, Brian, you saved me from deep, dark places, and all to be gone. And once it's gone, man. Like, I can't recreate that. I can't upload that on Daily Motion or Vimeo. And so I had a moment where I was just like, man, this is dark. But I thought, you know what? You got to let the chips fall where they may, as Tyler Durden said. And I just thought, we got to move forward. And so luckily we did. And this opened up a whole new door into what's happened the last few months with us creating our own platform, finding out there's this thing called the London Real Army out there, and finding 35,000 people that opened up their wallets and donated money to have a censorship-free platform. Something that, quite honestly, JP, I would have never asked for money if it wasn't for this. I never asked for $1 in 9 years. I don't like asking even for other people's help. So this has been me growing up as well as a human being. And it's been honestly one of the most incredible times of my life and the most stressful times of my life, the last 4 months.
Yeah. What you're doing, what you're leading the charge on, like, you remind me of William Wallace on Braveheart. That archetype of the hero, and I haven't seen your butt yet. Real men don't wear anything under their but the archetype of the hero who crusades for freedom, they're always someone who's willing to die for freedom, because I think there's something that is embedded in all of our psyches. Some of us it's deeper, some of us it's more conscious, but I think something says a life that is not a free life isn't a life worth living. That's why human instinct will eventually become willing to die in the name of freedom, fighting for freedom. Of course, hopefully nobody dies, but you're willing to let your business die. I know you don't want that. I know you're being very intelligent, but you've got that Braveheart attitude. I just want to recognize that in you, and I also
Well,
think
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, it's very hard for me to take a compliment like that. You know, William Wallace, actually, like about a mile from here, is the place where he was drawn and quartered. Like I walk
no
by that
kidding.
sometimes, and like that thing in the movie, it happened right in London where they ripped him apart. And so, look, look, I can't compare myself to someone like that, but it has made me really start to ask myself some deep questions about what does freedom of speech mean? How is it important? Is it? Why is it important? You know, why is it so important to our survival? So it's forced me to ask a lot of questions and come up with some answers. And look, you know, we've got a whole support structure here that's behind us. So I'm not the hero. I'm just in the position, and I got to make a decision it was the amygdala, really. It wasn't the frontal cortex deciding. I was just like, no, that's not okay. And luckily, I'm old enough as well to where this was never about the money for me. If I was in my 20s, you know, and I was a YouTuber and this was my thing, I don't know, you know, that kid maybe makes different decisions, but I'm old enough to know this is important, and it's worth, you know, dying for. It's worth the business dying for. So luckily, with some experience, we've been able to manage in these bumpy waters.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to, if you would, I'd love to dive more into you getting censored, how you were censored. I know more than just YouTube. I think you were kicked off LinkedIn for a little while, because a lot of people, they get surprised, like, oh, you got censored on YouTube? What's the deal? So it's a phenomenon that's very real, but it's not real to a lot of people. So could you give us some of the down and dirty details? Like, you got censored on YouTube. What's that mean? How much did you get censored? And I mean, I think you just had a podcast censored on Spotify, for crying out loud. So what's some of the down and dirty of what's this actually looked like for you getting censored?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, first of all, you know, I never knew anybody that got censored. That always happened to the weirdos, right? That always happened to the crazies, the QAnon people. You know, for 9 years, I'd never been anywhere near censored, you know, never even been broached the topic. So that happens to David Icke's, and that happens to, you know, the Alex Joneses of the world. So it wasn't real until it happens to you. And then when it happens, you're like, oh my gosh, there's really some things going on underneath the surface that aren't up to scratch. And so that day, the video was taken down. After having a conversation with my rep, he said it violated community standards. And I was like, okay, what are those? And he said, well, they're all written here. And I was like, which one did I violate? And they're like, well, you know, we can't be specific. And then I was like, well, what did he do wrong? And they said, well, he was a COVID-19 denier. I was like, wow, that sounds a lot like a Holocaust denier. It's some pretty creative language you use in there, but that's not what he said. He actually said the PCR tests pick up small bits of RNA that you could have been holding in your system for a long time. There's a lot of false positives and a lot of false negatives. The test was actually never designed to test for coronavirus. The creator of the test said that. So it's quite nuanced, just like a long form conversation is nuanced. It's not what he said. And they were like, well, also we side with the WHO. So anything against the WHO, we censor. And I was like, okay, but the WHO said not to wear face masks recently. Governor Cuomo said to wear face masks. So are you censoring him? If I go on YouTube, I'll see nothing from Cuomo, right? And they said, no, that's not true. I said, okay. I said, how long have these policies been in place? They said 6 months. I said, 6 months? You've had COVID-19 policies? It was in March or April. I said, in October you had this? And he said, oh, no, that's not true. I said, okay, so what's actually going on here? This is what the conversation was like. But then it became, well, if you violate the community standards, you will get a strike. With the strike, that means you can't live stream, you can't upload. With 2 strikes, it's, again, you're banned for 2 weeks, and 3 strikes, you're completely deplatformed. And we will do this if you violate our community standards. So after a nice little conversation I had, they basically said, remember who the 800-pound gorilla is, and all we have to do is blink and you're gone. And that means any video that we deem as violating our policies, you're going to get dinged for. And sure enough, about 3 weeks later, they found an old video I had recorded 18 months earlier of David Icke talking about phone calls made during the 9/11 hijacking that said violated their hate speech policy, and they gave us our first strike on YouTube. And so we were banned from live stream and uploads for a week. I actually didn't go out and start crying about it because I don't want to be the victim in this case. You know, I don't like the way we celebrate victims in this culture. I'm not a victim. I take full extreme ownership, as Jocko Willink would say, for everything we've done. I'll take the consequences. And that's why we created the Digital Freedom Platform. We can talk about that. But just to follow on from censorship, soon after, some of the clips we had published from that episode were censored on Facebook. Facebook turned off my ad account. We were spending 40, 50,000 pounds a month there, just shut it off, no reply. Shadow ban on Instagram. LinkedIn, completely personal and business profile gone, deplatformed. Vimeo account terminated. Vimeo, Dropbox account terminated. So it means they had to go into Dropbox and watch my videos on Dropbox. Pretty interesting. PayPal suddenly suspended for the Digital Freedom Platform, which we can talk about. It was crazy, you know. I was like, this happens to other people, not me. And so we tried to keep people posted along the way and talk about that. But these are pretty much all your tech platforms, you're gone, because they don't want to be associated with that. They get a tweet, hey, Vimeo, how come you're supporting, you know, COVID-19 conspiracy theories? You know, they got to answer for that. So they just decided to go ahead and do the censoring. And we took it on the chin. It was looking pretty dark here, to be honest. I was actually concerned we were going to be shut down by the government. My bank accounts would be frozen. I was playing out all those scenarios in our mind. So it got pretty dark here for a little while.
Yeah. That sounds dark. It sounds like you probably lost more than 1 hour of sleep over that time. You know, at the core level, freedom of speech is all about speak your mind. Not speak what I agree with or a certain entity agrees with, but you can speak your mind if you're crazy. And that's what freedom of speech says. And then we get into the community guidelines around, you know, the COVID-19 5G guidelines are like super unified across the social media platforms. Dropbox even, that's just weird and eerie. So if we take a step back from a second around like, oh, they're infringing on freedom of speech, and get curious, like, why are all the tech giants so unified and so motivated to censor around, you know, what is quite honestly so much around alternative ideas with COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is a deep rabbit hole when it comes to the why. We can go down there or we cannot. Look, you know, the truth is that, you know, a lot of these platforms have very similar policies. When they go to deplatform people, they all seem to work in unison, which again looks like some kind of a strange, illegal, collusive process. I mean, David Icke deplatformed from Facebook and YouTube within 24 hours. Same with Alex Jones. Same with Del Bigtree, who I had on the show recently. Look, the whys, you can go deep on it. You know, as we continued down the path of, you know, funny enough, this actually opened my mind about this, and I started having more guests on to talk about this. And I spoke to Robert Kennedy Jr., you know, son of Bobby Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1968, and he has been working with autistic children and been examining vaccines for a long time. And you know, I actually said to David Icke in the first episode, I will be the first one to get a vaccine, you know, and I'm a trained engineer from MIT. I believe in the science. But when I started learning about what was happening, I started to really question why I would do that. But again, when you start to mention the vaccine word, I mean, if I thought YouTube was already sensitized, they saw the Kennedy episode on my digital freedom platform and said, don't even think about putting that on YouTube. So when the vaccine word comes up, everybody goes even to a higher notch. Sure, COVID-19 denial, 5G related to your immune system, but the vaccine, everyone got sensitized. And I don't know the truth. There's some great movies that go down rabbit holes as to why they might not want, is pharmaceutical involved or other groups involved. I choose not to go down that route. I choose to focus on the freedom of speech. And I've had a lot of great conversations with people like Michael Shermer, Candace Owens, the people that really understand, why do we need it? And one thing I've understood about freedom of speech is it really means freedom of speech for things you don't want to hear out of other people's minds. It's really easy to say, I can say what I want. But the question is, like you said, will you defend to the death someone else's right to say something you fundamentally disagree with? If you really can say that and look yourself in the mirror, and that's an ego destroying moment if you mean that, then you really mean what this is about, which is to have other ideas in your head so you can defend your own points of view, so we can have an open and honest debate, and so the best idea can win and we can move forward as a society. That's how we've always moved forward with greatness, when the best idea wins, not the worst idea for a plane or the worst idea for a medicine or the worst idea for a government. It's the best idea. And that's always, shown the upsurgence of humankind. And now we have a situation where that's not allowed. But it's because of digital platforms. Back in the day here in London, you would go to Hyde Park, and on the corner, you could say whatever you want on a Sunday if you're standing on the ladder. And that was the way we exchanged ideas,
Yeah.
But nowadays it's on digital platforms that are now owned by private companies. Now they have community policies. And especially when you're all locked down during COVID, and again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when that's the only way to communicate with each other, and we can't talk with each other or even see our faces when we're wearing a mask, digital freedom of speech becomes just as important as freedom of speech. And that's why it's important to push for this and then even take legal action, which we're doing behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, and I want to get more into that, whatever degree we can. Yet, real quick, you mentioned something earlier, like we live in a culture where people really want to cancel each other when someone says something that they don't like. So there's this like freedom of speech. We're eroding it away at a personal level. I think what's happening with the tech giants is well deserved. And what I mean by that, I think we have created a psychological society where we tolerate that, and we do that to each other. When you see something someone posts online and it evokes this emotion in you, and then you try to cancel them, like that's censoring. So I get why the tech giants can do this, because we're doing that at a personal level. And I'm curious, just from your perspective, what do you think has to happen in an individual to make them want to shut down a different point of view that challenges their current point of view?
Well, look, I've had this conversation, quite a lot lately to try to figure out kind of what's going on, because you're right. The cancel culture kind of relates to freedom of speech, because in cancel culture, a debate isn't allowed. A conversation isn't allowed. If you say something that's out of whack or triggered someone, you get banished. Like, you're gone, you're done. You're not allowed to host the Oscars. Your television show is over. You're fired from your job as whatever, you're canceled. So it really is similar to freedom of speech. Now, why is that happening now? There's a lot of theories. I mean, one of my mentors, the $1 trillion man, said political correctness is a manifestation of a lack of self-esteem, if you really want to go deep on that. Okay. So, what's happening these days, when you don't have self-esteem, political correctness comes up. Oh, you're offending me. Oh, that hurts. Oh, you're not allowed to say that. That's triggering me. Add to that the fact that we're all communicating digitally. So I don't actually look into your eyes. I don't know you. I don't see your emotions. I don't feel you when you say something to me. I guarantee if you stuck a bunch of people arguing on Twitter into an elevator and turned the power off for 2 hours, they might walk out with a completely different understanding of who they are and who these people are and why they think that way. They probably would come to a consensus, but we don't do that now. It's all wars on Twitter. And, you know, if anybody's ever had an email war, and unfortunately I've had some before, where there's no context, there's no empathy, it just escalates. We're seeing this. So, you know, it's a combination of a lot of factors now going to the next level. And now these companies as well, you know, they have their community policies and their own agendas. And unfortunately, I don't see it going away anytime soon until we unplug or find some way of realizing the madness. But it's kind of going the wrong way. And it's a little bit part of this freedom of speech argument. But it doesn't make me very positive. And again, it goes back to what we do here in the studio. We have these long form, uncensored, unscripted conversations where you literally walk a mile in a man's shoes or a woman's shoes. And, you know, when you actually sit down and listen to someone's whole story for 2.5 hours, that's why David Icke is so dangerous when he's on London Real, because you get him in 6-camera high definition. You see this man's entire 30-year journey. He's not the guy that think the lizards are in charge. He's the guy that's saying, what is with your perceptions? Like, what are you perceiving? And the ultimate solution is to act out of love and not fear. You know, David doesn't have an agenda for you. He doesn't want you to hate someone. He says, make your own decisions out of love at the end. And that's something you can't just cancel, because that's a real human being. So, you know, there's a lot of things I just threw up there. But the cancel culture, the short form, the clickbait, the 180 characters, it's a dangerous way to communicate, but I only see that going one way, which is more of that. And, you know, America's crazy right now to watch. I don't know what it's like to live there. But we need to find some way to find some common ground.
I know it. You know, with Dan Pena's opinion of we're so politically correct because of low self-esteem, you know, marry that together with David Icke's, you know, when people aren't acting out of love, they're acting out of fear. They're happy to give up and take away other people's freedoms. And then Tim Kennedy, who I know you had on your show, and he's a friend of mine. And when I had him on my show, you know, this is a guy, you know, Army Ranger, Green Beret, top 5 in the UFC. I think he's the bravest human I've ever met. And he is someone who has fought for freedom. He has killed for freedom. He's been blown up for freedom. He's watched his friends die for freedom. I don't think there's another human on the planet more qualified to talk about freedom. So when I asked him, like, Tim, you know, the compliance of put on the mask, go, stay in your home, don't go here, outside of the debate, like how deadly is this disease, outside of that, people are happily giving up their freedoms. Why is that? He simply said, because people are weak. You have to be afraid in order to give up a freedom, and you're only afraid if you're weak. And man, I want to own that. I'm not going to pretend I'm the strongest person in the world. There's scared, weak parts of me that I'm working on a daily basis. And I think there's so much of that in our culture that creates the cancel excitement. Like, oh, the more scared I am, the weaker I feel, the more afraid I have to be of a strong idea. Whether I agree or not, I'm going to fear it. So, man, anyway.
Yeah, no, and look, you know, it kind of goes in cycles to a certain extent. You know, we came, what do they call it? The greatest generation, you know, the ones that went to World War II. And of course we do glamorize the past, but you know, it kind of goes in cycles. And it seems like we've come in the last 50, 60 years of a period where there's a lot of choice. There's a lot of great, you know, economic success for everyone. And, you know, they say hard times breed hard people. There hasn't necessarily been the hard times. And, you know, that could be something to do with that. And fear, when people are scared, they don't make intelligent decisions. There's been a lot of fear these days, you know, but this will play out. You know, if we continue the way this goes, some hard times will come, and it will create some hard people. that we'll be able to make some decisions, Otherwise, there's not enough Tim Kennedys in the world. The reason he's hard is because he's been on the tip of the spear fighting for all of our freedoms, but that's only a few thousand guys like that. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. The funny thing is that our governments and our policies, they're all lagging indicators of what's inside us. It really is true. And this might be a little deep for some people, but they're all really reflections of us. Trump is a reflection of us, and all these people are. And so it comes down to what's on the inside. What are we scared of? What are our inhibitions? What are all those things inside of us that gets projected out? So the answers are always inside. Confronting your fears, your fear of death, that's a big one. With the COVID came, the fear of death, you really saw a lot of people, you saw true colors. And the people you thought were going to lead you in this situation kind of disappeared. The people you didn't know so much about became our leaders. It was very interesting to see how this kind of made everything play out. And yeah, I think the only good news here is we've seen a bit of the matrix kind of get perturbed a little bit. And we've got to kind of see behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz and see, oh my gosh, there's censorship here and there's this here. We've also seen that we can create our own digital platforms. We can go ahead and keep streaming these messages and put out censorship-free content. So that's been beautiful. And I've also seen great voices like the Tim Kennedys and all these other people stepping up. So it's been also really, it makes me feel good and optimistic. But the hooks in you from these digital platforms, that's the scary part, because most people's identity is a digital identity. Most people's relationship with the world is a digital relationship. Even if they don't know it, it really is. And there is an information war going on right now, and you don't even know you're at war. And it's being fought by all sorts of parties. Could be, cabals and tech giants of the Chinese or the Russians, and it's in your living room in your kids' iPads, and you don't even know it. That's the greatest kind of con that's happening.
Yeah. With the hooks, there's an argument that says, that the YouTubes, Facebooks, Instagrams, they're private companies. They should be able to do what they want. And I don't agree with that, but I'm not curious about my opinion here. But if I pretended to agree with that, I'm thinking like, okay, Brian, if you came over to my house, you walk in my door and say you start insulting my wife, I'm going to ask you to leave my house. And that's like a personal control over my domain that I'm glad we each have. So one could say, well, that's what YouTube's doing. That's what Facebook's doing. So I'm curious what your perspective is towards this argument of like, well, they're private companies. They should be able to do what they like. And if you don't like it, get off.
Yeah, look, it's a really good point. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole of free speech, and I have everything from the First Amendment to the Federalist Papers to the European Union Convention, all the way down and find out what it's about, to where yelling fire in a crowded theater, by the way, with the intent of causing harm. There's all these little nuances that have made up the law and what the Supreme Court decided. If you want to go all the way down that rabbit hole, you start to make those decisions. And like you said, freedom of speech is one thing, but can someone come over to your house and shout in your ear while you're eating dinner? There are limits, to that. And a private company as well. Look, I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. You could argue, look, the private company built this and they are allowed to have their own rules and they're allowed to have a community policy. But also, if that becomes a monopoly of communication, there is a history and there's a precedent for the U.S. breaking up monopolies in steel and oil and gas for the benefit of the rights of the citizens. And yet they've never, ever seen a monopoly like this. The founding fathers could never have seen an information monopoly like this. The search engine monopoly. People don't realize when you search in Google, your results they have a massive agenda to them. Candace Owens, a kind of a very famous young Black woman who's conservative, said she was like typing in to the search engine, how many Black people are there? And she got articles saying, COVID-19 is attacking Black people. All these things bad are happening. There's just, if the communities are all this stuff. And she had to retype it, she said 6 times, because she kept getting all this strange information that was like this leftist agenda of her search. And that's why she switched to this DuckDuckGo, which I guess is a different search engine. So, and then when you lock everyone down, and this thing is the only way we exchange information, then you can make more arguments. There's actually a precedent here in London that if a private company is behaving as a public utility, then it has to be governed by the laws of that land. And the London Stock Exchange was one of those, as a private company acting as a public utility. And if you look at a video here on YouTube, there'll be an ad by the National Health Service, the NHS, for COVID-19 underneath it. So the government is literally paying these companies, and yet we're not allowed to communicate on them. So there are some legal precedents and arguments you can make that if this is the way people are forced to communicate, then it should follow the laws of the land. But again, that's something that'll have to go to the Supreme Courts and to kind of go from there and see if we can fight that. The more interesting argument is this, is that you might find a platform or a network that respects people's right to free speech that people will then choose to spend their dollars and eyeballs on. So great example, Joe Rogan going to Spotify. It's been rumored to be $100 million deal. I think it's probably more like a couple $100 million. But what people don't really see, and what I see and a lot of people see, is Joe moved to Spotify because I think he was tired of being censored on YouTube. And his full episodes, he's constantly tired of it. He obviously didn't really broach many topics during COVID-19. And I don't know if that was a choice by Joe, but Joe was actually not one of the people having really important, difficult discussions about the lockdown, the policy, the COVID. And maybe he was concerned, but Spotify, I think, was an option where he wasn't going to be censored. Now it's kind of interesting because they happened to censor some of my episodes, and we can talk about that. But, you know, that was Joe making a decision that he maybe wanted to go with a platform that would reward him and respect his rights. And I think that's incredible. And, you know, we were able to raise over $1 million in about 2 weeks to create our digital freedom platform. So now we can live stream anything and not worry about censorship. And we've done about 30 plus episodes, you know, to massive audiences. And so we've created our own platform and said, okay, guess what? We don't have to do that. And we have the funding for it, and we have the desire, which is a beautiful thing. So I'd like to think that, you know, capitalism will figure out solutions and people can vote with their dollars. But I also am smart enough to know that when Google controls 90% of search engine traffic, and YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, owned by the company that owns the largest search engine in the world, I also realize that it's going to be a long time before people really have that freedom. And that's why I decided to try to stay on YouTube. And so, you know, just to finish out that story, for the last 90 days, around here we call it, it's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That's what I told my guys. It's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. We talk about puppy dogs and unicorns, and we put nice things on YouTube that don't have any chance, hopefully, of being censored or banned. And so I had 90 days of my content strike that I was basically told in no uncertain terms by YouTube. And this will all be shown in a documentary film we're making about this. That you are one upload away from being completely deplatformed. I mean, they said that to me on recorded video. And so luckily last week our strike expired, but they've also said to me, we're not going to give you another strike. You're just going to be gone. Yeah. And so now it's the Mr. Rogers channel. We have to be nice there, but I get 20 million views a month from YouTube. And some of those people might know I have a digital freedom platform and might choose to hear uncensored content. So I'm doing this kind of dual strategy, you know, where I get some eyeballs here, but you get the real truth over here. And maybe that's the future, JP. Maybe that's the future of our content platforms. But I still think most people have no idea of the censorship that's actually happening out there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation, and, you know, how you're leading the charge for your personal voice of realizing, okay, YouTube's rules, they're not right according to the Constitution, according to my opinion. But YouTube will deplatform you as they told you. So you create your own digital freedom platform. By the way, can you share more about the digital freedom platform, where people can find it? Because you have some mega awesome interviews. I've been listening to everyone you've been doing recently, because it's not only an example of like, you too can do this if as a way of representing your freedom of speech, but also like you just got great content.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, the fact that we just decided to create this separate entity. And so again, my initial reaction was, this is not okay. When I spoke to YouTube and realized there was no way we were going to get that banned episode, which we called Rose Ike 2. So I've done 5 interviews with David Icke this year. So the first one went super viral, was watched 10 million times. The second one, I told the world beforehand we were going to do it. The first one I didn't, because I just wasn't sure what was going to happen. We told everybody, massive audience, would have gone on. It was banned and censored. So pretty much days later, I said, we're doing Rose Ike 3, and we got to create our own platform, and we're going to have to raise money for it. And this is, by the way, during the time of total lockdown. So we thought, am I going to go to GoFundMe or Indiegogo? And I realized 2 things. First of all, as soon as we raise 10 grand, they're going to ban it, just like I got banned from everything else. Second of all, there's nobody around probably even to approve it. So we decided to do everything from scratch around here. I got an incredible team, and we decided to put it together, create the fundraising platform, everything. And honestly, we did all the math and figured it was going to cost us $100,000 to stream to over 1 million unique viewers for Rose Ike 3, which would make it the largest internet live stream of a conversation in human history. And we just stuck that out there and said 1 million people, and we started working towards it. And I mean, honestly, JP, I thought there was no way we could raise $100,000 in 11 days. Like, there's no way. I mean, I thought maybe we could run 10 or 20,000, maybe. But like within the first 24 hours, it was 25,000. And then it was like 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. And we were like, wait a second. People want more than just one ep. They want a platform. And then they want a legal fund to take this to the Supreme Court. They want an app, so where they can not worry about a browser now and have it downloaded on their phone. So we decided we were just going to take this to the whole next level. And as Conor McGregor would say, we're not here to take part. We're here to take over. You know, let's create a platform and let's just go head to head with these guys. And so luckily I got a team, and we love swinging for the fences. And honestly, I got nothing better to do. So what the hell, you know, what the hell? We might as well go out, you know, you might as well go out swinging. So I just figured, what the hell, let's throw caution to the wind and let's see how big we can go. So again, this is in a time of the biggest recession in 100 years. Everyone's out of work and people are still giving money, you know, $5, $100, thousands of dollars is amazing. I'm getting major Premier League footballers who are promoting our stuff, heavyweight boxers, supermodels. They're all coming out in support of us. I mean, it blew me away. And I got a bunch of other people I thought would have my back that completely either sold me out or went dark. That's cool, man. That's why I love crises. You find out who's got your back. But I'd rather have 100 people that will ride or die with me than 1,000 people that just like my content. And I found them. So that was amazing. We built the platform. We got the technology. 2 days before, we got a Silicon Valley company to live stream it. We were about to transfer them a big chunk of money, like $50,000. The CEO called us up and said, oh, we saw what you're doing. We can't support you. So literally 24 hours before, on a Saturday, we're making phone calls to places, and there's only a finite number of companies that can do a live stream to 1 million unique people. And let me just make this clear, because a lot of people didn't understand. This isn't about hosting a video on a website. This is about live streaming to 1 million concurrent people on a piece of technology, because we pretty much assumed it wasn't going to be there an hour later. Yeah. We had malicious attacks on our website. We're being hit from every angle. So we ended up getting the company that live streamed the Super Bowl 2 years ago, and they came on board with us Saturday night. And then it all happened on that May 3rd, I think it was, for Rose Ike 3. And luckily, it all came together. I told the world we were going to film in some bunker, because I thought literally maybe there would be police here, or the power would go out or something. So we brought David through another entrance, and then we got him here. And, you know, by the grace of Allah, we were able to stream that day, and we hit 1.3 million uniques. And
Wow.
it was amazing. It was a beautiful moment, but it was really the London Real Army, all these people from around the world that made it happen. We've now had 35,000 people contribute, raised about $1.35 million. And it's blown me away. And honestly, I am not spending that money. I am holding on to it like a custodian, because I'm a frugal bastard when it comes to running a business. And I'm trying to use it only for when we need it. So I only spend it on streams when we need it. I only build the tech as we need it. But I know that this might be our war chest for 12 months, and we're going to have to keep doing this. And so we're a custodian for that. And that's what we're running Digital Freedom Platform. And we've been able to have people like Judy Mikovits, the star of Plandemic, Dr. Rashid Buttar, you know, you name it. We've had them on here talking about the most controversial things ever. And it's been amazing. It's been a big learning curve too, man. The technology it's a nightmare, but it's been an incredible journey. And, you know, honestly, the greatest thing that ever happened to us this year was being banned on YouTube, really.
The giant has been awakened in you. And can people access that via londonreal.tv?
So we put it on freedomplatform.tv. Okay. It's just a separate entity, a separate website. So that lives there. The content lives there. And that's just a separate piece where you can go find, I think, about 30 episodes. You can donate on there as well. And there's a separate platform, londonreal.tv. So they're really kind of keep them separate. You can definitely go from one to the other, but really keeping them as separate places, and a place where you can raise money on one, and the other one is really where London Real is. So trying to keep them separate, but they definitely have crossover. Obviously, I'm the host of both, but really trying to keep one separate, the money there separate, the technology separate, and the other one is London Real Academy, and everything we do in the business there.
That's amazing. 1.3 million viewers for a live stream. To me, that those people aren't tuning in to see your good looks. And you're a good looking guy, don't get me wrong. I would even dare say, and this I'm just speculating, I would dare say they're not even just tuning in to hear the information that comes from you or David Icke, though like I've been riveted and usually uncomfortable by what I hear, like, oh, that's challenging me to think more. But to me, that's evidence, 1.3 million people, that they're banding together for what matters most, to be part of a movement that's standing for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, human dignity, civil liberties. I know that's got to be one of the reasons why people are so magnetized to your content now.
Yeah, and I mean, also we have to remember, like, you know, especially back then and even now, there was no other information out there. Nobody was talking about this. And so if you wanted to hear an alternative narrative, I mean, you can't find it anywhere. It's being censored on all your social platforms. And so people wanted to tune in to where they could hear an alternative narrative. The other question, and you kind of touched it a little bit there, is why me and David on London Real? I mean, David does videos on his own website, but there's something about the two of us. And actually, I was talking to Alex Jones about this from InfoWars. And look, you can have your opinions on Alex, and I don't agree with everything Alex does, and he's made some big mistakes, and he'll be the first to admit it. But Alex said this. He said, Brian, it's the authenticity. He said, that's what people feel. And again, you know, JP, it's a feeling, you know, it's not all brain power and logic and arguments. It's like people are making a decision with their heart, and they're feeling this vibe, because with the setup we have here and the cameras in the studio, you feel like you're in the room, and it's two humans having this conversation, and you can feel the authenticity, I think, of me being curious. I don't have an agenda. I don't have sponsors. Of me allowing David to talk. David's talking with all of his passion, and people feel this human connection that's bigger than all the scientific papers in the world and all the statistics. And they're riveted because they're getting something they can't get somewhere else. And I don't know, we create this magic. David always says when he's in this studio, he's like, Brian, the energy in this room is it's just ramping up. And when I'm in there, it's intense. And we create this moment that's bigger than us. It's almost like this, all of humanity is creating this moment of potential truth that we can all take something from. And that's why I think there's so much interest in those broadcasts, because there's something, I don't know, intangible happening there. And it's more than just information.
I think you're right. That's my experience of it. You've gathered, I believe it's over 200,000 signatures to signing your open letter for freedom of speech. What are you doing with that? You also mentioned a legal fund. Yeah, what are you doing with that?
Yeah, great question. So look, after we did the Freedom Platform, and after I've, put all these statements out, and I'm constantly vlogging, and I'm, openly challenging YouTube. And again, we should talk about how to talk about censorship on the platforms you're being censored. It's a fine line. I've been walking a fine line with YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. And look, for all I know, YouTube could deplatform me while we're talking here. I mean, like literally for a month, I was trying not to think about it, but it could happen at any moment. Because honestly, one time the rep is telling me one thing, and 3 hours later I got a strike. And I went back to the rep. I said, "You just said everything was going to be okay." And he said, "Well, it's out of my hands, Brian." So again, that's a whole nother thing about how you talk about censorship on a platform you're censored on, and we can get into that. But I thought to myself, we need to do more. So we had raised money for a legal fund, but I thought we needed to just write an open letter to articulate our points of view. And so I wrote this letter. I spent a lot of time on it, just talking about what's going on here, and why I believe there is something called digital freedom of speech, which is different than freedom of speech, because in this era, most of our communication is digital. So there needs to be a digital freedom of speech, and then there needs to be the legislation of digital freedom of speech. So a government like here in Britain or in the US needs to come out and say, digital freedom of speech will be legislated. So no company, no monopoly can ever shut down what is a basic human right or something protected in the Constitution. So I wrote an open letter to just show the platforms and the governments, because also there's a regulator here called Ofcom, which censors radio stations and television channels, and they censored a television channel for reproducing one of our Ike interviews. So it was to show all of them that it's not just me whining and complaining. It's not just some YouTuber or some American in a fancy suit that's crying. It's actually people. And so we put the open letter out there, and we've gotten over 200,000 signatures with emails of people that are agreeing with us by saying, we demand these things from the government. We demand these interviews to be replatformed on these technology platforms. We demand that these regulators allow this content to be put back on these radio stations and television channels, and we also allow for the legislation. So that was something we really wanted to put out there, and that was something we did with the open letter. So just one of the many things that we're putting out there, that the fundraising, the putting out the content, again, it's just part of that strategy where we think it's important to put these things out there and get these signatures out in front of people's eyes.
And for people who want to sign the open letter and join the movement, I've signed it. It feels good to just sign, even if there's nothing more. But people can do that, I believe, at londonreal.tv.
Yeah, londonreal.tv/letter. I think will take you right there. And I think probably it's on freedomplatform.tv/letter as well. And I think both of those /give as well is where the donation page is. And again, like, I was really hesitant to ask for money, but that's because I think my ego, I've always been this self-reliant, do-it-yourself kind of guy. And I always thought London Real had to stand on its own as a business. But what happens is when you ask people to be a part of the solution, it becomes a bigger thing. And so I had to almost take my ego out of it and realize this was an effort by a global community moving us forward. So that's why we did that. There's that expression, you can go fast alone or you can go further together, I think is what they say. I'm butchering that. So that's what we're doing. And again, for me, it's money we only use when it advances the agenda of digital freedom. So the legal fund right now, we raised $250,000. We've only used a small portion of that for, and I haven't really talked about this publicly, but a lawsuit against Facebook for something they took down for us and some other actions we're taking here that I can't necessarily talk about. And we're going to use it as and when is necessary. But not until then. Until then, it's just going to stay in its own special purpose vehicle until we need it. So that's what we're doing with the funds, and that's our plan going forward. And yeah, the plan is to keep pushing forward and get this thing out there, and to stay on these other platforms as long as we can, and to walk the line as you are yourself, where you can talk about censorship and not being censored. But the truth is as much as it would look bad for YouTube to deplatform me right now, and they get some bad press, but it's a blink. They would move on. They don't care.
Yeah.
So, we have to be cognizant of that. We can do more with these platforms, but at some point they might get rid of us. And at some point, look, they've already come after my character. I waited 9 years for Vice to write an article about me, and then they wrote an article about me, totally defaming us. And, we're going after them too. So look, they'll come after your character. They'll come after your business. But for us, we're all in on this, and we're just moving forward.
Yeah. With these, I don't know, maybe they're even $1 trillion companies. Could one just take them to court and like, this is the First Amendment that you're violating, your monopoly? I mean, realistically, could that even be effective?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. So, PragerU, which is kind of a conservative-based media company that puts out a lot of short-form content about a lot of different issues, took YouTube to court in 2017, and they lost. They took them to the Supreme Court because they had, I think, demonetized a video, or maybe even taken it off the platform, that they thought, was against community standards. And again, let's talk about something maybe we haven't spoken about. The truth is there's a handful of a handful of individuals that control the community policies of these massive digital platforms. And most of them were speaking to Congress a few weeks ago, if you want to know their names, right? It's the CEO of Alphabet. It's Zuckerberg. It's, Bezos was up there, and maybe it's Jack Dorsey. So these people who, funny enough, all hang out in Silicon Valley, and funny enough, all are very liberal or left-leaning, decide these policies that we all have to just live with. So PragerU is quite conservative, and they got dinged, and they said, look, this isn't constitutional, this isn't right. They lost to YouTube. The good thing and the light at the end of the tunnel is this, JP, is in the UK, there's a precedence for when a private company acts as a public utility, they have to follow the laws in that country. And the beauty is that we only have to prove it in one country to affect a global policy change. So for the lawyers I've spoken to here in the UK and the US said, Brian, it's actually even better if you're in the UK, because if you win in the UK, they've got to make the changes to the policy. So that's one light at the end of the tunnel. I do know of a few cases against Facebook happening. We've started a case with them. Candace Owens as well. I'm aware of another case that's using RICO statutes against Facebook. So people are trying to take on some of these giants. So it is a possibility, but let's be honest, there's no precedent of this working in the past. Trump is talking about it, right? He's talking about it.
He's been censored recently as well.
He's been censored, yeah. And then also this Article 230 in America, which basically removes them from liability, is now being challenged as well. So there's people talking about it, but look, this is highly polarizing. It's an election year. We've got, we've got all sorts of strange things happening in America. We've got the leftist agenda. We've got, defunding the police. We've got rioting in the streets. We've got, like I said, an election year where these issues are being weaponized to change the political landscape. This is a tricky time to talk about this stuff in the next 3 months. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out next year. So look, I'm hopeful. I'm also hopeful that, capitalism will give us choice, to where maybe, Rogan will show, look, I'm going to Spotify, I'm going to a place where I'm not censored. So we have our digital freedom platform. I think there's potentially options. So let's see. I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic. The fact that, people have not been successful, taking YouTube to court in the past.
Yeah. You mentioned the trickiness of talking about being censored by social media. on social media.
How?
First off, with a twofold mindset, and I'll share two
What
things with.
happened to you, JP? Can you tell me what happened to you?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I put out a video. It's probably 2 months ago at this point, maybe longer. But the video was called "What It's Like to Believe Everything the Media Tells You." And this is, you had already been censored, but it was right around that time. So like, I'm well aware, like, okay, like, speaking, helping to elevate people out of the fear that they're being indoctrinated, and that's dangerous. I'm like, I just went to sleep one night. This idea came to me. I woke up in the morning. I'm like, I got to make this video. So I cleared my schedule, rearranged everything. I said to my videographer, we're going to shoot this video and release it today. It's just one of those ideas I'm in service to. It's not an idea of mine. So I put the video out. It goes pretty viral, but I chose to only put it out on YouTube because I know with YouTube, there's at least strikes. With Facebook, it's a little more ambiguous. So I put it out on YouTube, and it's over 4 million views. People loved it. And I was just shocked. Like, first off, like, the thing is still monetized. And then, like, also it's still on the platform. I was just like high-fiving. I would have been pleased if it was able to be on the platform, but demonetized. Like, I don't agree with that, but I understand the community guidelines are the way they are, even though I don't like it. But so it was about 3 weeks later that video got demonetized. My hypothesis, just to speculate, I don't think the whatever voice technology they use to scan videos and censor them, I don't think it can detect sarcasm. So in that video, I was playing the fool that just believes everything the media tells you, and tells you why it's a good idea to believe all the things that the media is telling you about all these specific things. So, but I got a message, this has been reviewed by a human and it's demonetized. And it's like, I was, okay. I didn't like it, but I wasn't bent out of shape. Then last week, I put out a video called The COVID Conspiracy Theory Guide. And in that video, I was careful. I didn't say 5G, but I would like hand signal, then say G, because, and then I even in that video talked about how like I can't actually say this because the book Burning Millennials in Silicon Valley will censor me. But playing it onto the, just like an exaggerated Alex Jones kind of conspiracy theory guy. But then the next day it was censored on YouTube. And the idea of appealing that video being censored, it's like my hands are cuffed on that, because in the if I click on appeal it, it says, okay, if you appeal this and it's upheld that the video is going to remain banned, then you get a strike. So it's like, well, then I can't really appeal it then,
Yeah,
can I?
it's mafia tactics.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what happened to me. But here's my mindset. First off, I'm not going to be dumb and just create a moment of outrage through victimization where I do exactly what I know will get me the 3 strikes and deplatformed. I'm not going to do that in order to create a momentary flare of attention and raise a point. I think I can be more effective than that. So much like you, I'm mindful of what I say and don't say while still saying what I need to say. But then the second thing is I'm willing to lose it all. Much like yourself, I've had the good fortune through a lot of hard work of building a beautiful online empire that supports me well. But here's the thing, I've got a son on the way. My first son. I know you've got children.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. And I imagine the world I want to create for him. And I realize, if my son, if God forbid the freedoms continue to be eroded away. And in 20 years, we look back and the world is just different. My son asks me, Dad, what did you do when our freedoms were being taken away? My answer, sure as shit, ain't gonna be nothing. So, I'm willing to lose it all, where I would much rather, if it came to it, need to pick up cans along the side of the road to feed my family while being able to speak my truth and represent the people and crusade for the people, rather than being enslaved and like, here's my empire that I have because I'm suppressing my truth. So that mindset of, I'm not going to be dumb, I'm going to be as intelligent as I can, while realizing speaking truth and crusading for the people that are way more, this is way more than me. I'm willing to do that. So
Yeah, that's a good basis. You want to be able to tell your son in 2040, when he says, Daddy, what did you do in the great pandemic of 2020? And you want to be able to look him in the eye and tell him something you're proud of. The other good test is being able to look Tim Kennedy in the eye and tell him what you did. And then if he doesn't smack you, then you probably did the right thing. These are good tests, But look, the truth is it all does come back to fear to a certain extent. And it's a great time to really confront your fears. As YouTube creators, I mean, hitting that 1 million subs is something that's a big deal. And, it's something you always dreamed of, and the gold button and all that. And we got one here, and you work so hard for it. But, you also have to think, is it really everything? It's not, and that even in the times of COVID, you have to think, well, yeah, I could die. Is that everything? And these are these fears we have that'll just make us play these little quiet lives of desperation, make us live these lives of quiet desperation that ultimately we won't be proud of. And so it's worth really asking yourself, what am I scared of? Am I really scared to die? I'm going to die. How do I want to die? How do I want to be remembered? Am I scared to lose my platform? Okay. But there's also other things will open up. There are other realities after this, and sometimes you got to trust the process, let the chips fall where they may, and just move forward, and if either one of us gets deplatformed on YouTube, there will be another revolution. There always will be something, I believe. So I think it's important for people to ask themselves, what are they scared of? And to realize you build it up to be this massive thing that, again, it can really make you live a life that you're not proud of. And just feel free to blast through that thing and realize, actually, it really wasn't a big deal. Most of our fears are really not a big deal. And it's a great time to realize that. So I have as well. That being said, I'm happy we're still on YouTube, but I made peace 2 months ago. I did a long vlog that got like 1 million views. I said, it's over. And I said, I've made peace with this thing and we're going to move on.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Last couple of questions, brother, before I let you go. I know a burning question so many people have. They're feeling it right now. It's what can I do? Like, people feel this. They want to support it. They want to be part of the movement. I think there's far more people out there, certainly in both of our audiences, that they want to be on the battlefield. They want to be part of the movement. They're not people who want to look back in 2040 and tell their kids, like, yeah, I was sitting on the sidelines watching, I did nothing. So people want to be involved. So at a practical level, based on your experience, what you're seeing and what you're doing, what can people do to make a difference in upholding and reclaiming freedom of speech and fighting the digital censorship?
It's a great question. I think it's ultimately, if I really, really think hard about it and really break it down, I mean, it ultimately comes down to who you are. I mean, it's one thing to try to convince friends and send them the information and argue with them and all that stuff. But I think it comes down to your behavior at the end of the day, and whether you're willing to kowtow to your civil liberties being taken away from, whether you're willing to live in fear, whether you're willing to allow that small little increment of your freedoms and liberties being taken away, or whether you'll just stand up and say, no, I'm not having it. And that's something that David says. I mean, we are we are like 1,000 times more than they are, whatever the they is. You know, the elected officials, we vote for them. You know, it's our eyeballs that allow Alphabet to be worth $1 trillion plus. You know, it's like we have so much more power than we think we do. And yet we get this go along to get along kind of very sheep mentality, where we end up policing each other as sheep as well, where it's like, okay, just wear the mask. Okay, just don't say that online. Okay, just give your kid the vaccine, you know, just do it, man. And just, you'll get paid and, you know, you can do your thing. So I think we got to all look ourselves in the mirror and just be willing to stand up and say no. And that can be difficult. Like I'm taking the tube here and I'm not wearing a face mask and I get some dirty looks from people. And I decided to come in when this was all happening, and I decided to publish this content, and I decided to question it. And I probably could have done more even, but I just think we need to just say no and vote with our wallets and vote with our votes and start from within. I think is more important. Than it's easy to look at someone else and say, why don't you get it? But what are your actions? Even the people that agree with me, and a lot of them are out there. I get stopped in the streets all the time from people that thank me. They shake my hand. They say, we're totally with you on this. But I'm always like, what are your actions? Are your actions helping us get to the next level? So these are hard questions, man. I'm not saying it's easy to go against the grain and, you know, break the law or whatever. But if enough of us said, we're not having this, then it would be over. That's the crazy part, right? If enough of us just said, no, that's not okay, then it would be over in an instant. So I think that's what people need to do. Really wake up in the morning, make the hard decisions, whatever your choices are, based on your own research. Don't do what I say. Don't do what David Icke says. Take all the information and then make your decision. That's what I would say.
Yeah, amen to that. And I think a necessary companion to, you know, be able to make our decisions is bravery. Otherwise, I think we're we're carrying in our subconscious other people's decisions because it's less scary to do that. But when we can get a little bit of the Tim Kennedy energy in us, be brave, be strong, be willing to feel scared, but take action anyway, then we can not only figure out what the hell is my decision, what do I want, what do I think as an individual, but then we can follow through and live that with our actions. And your interviews with David Icke always end so beautifully. I go through like a whole hero's journey listening to them, each one, where I get scared, I get uncomfortable, I get riveted, but I'm always sent away with hope. And I really recommend people listen to them. They're fascinating. But part of his parting cell though all the time is live out of love, not out of fear. And I think if we can keep that in mind, if we can make our decisions out of love, not out of fear, then we will be having the sovereignty of ourselves so that we can actually make our decisions.
Yeah, I love the way David wraps those up. I mean, you know, look, when I go in for an episode on London Real, for me, I mean, it's the ultimate work of art. I'm trying to create the ultimate opera, the ultimate play where, you know, you go on a hero's journey with someone, you know, but at the end the elixir is brought back and you get this great teaching and this great lesson and you're like, wow. And that just happened unscripted, unedited in one take. Like that's my goal. And I've come close a few times over the last 9 years, but with David, when he brings that energy at the end, and he did it pretty much in every one of them this year, although I think in 2 and 3, it's really strong. And at the end, he's like, you make these decisions out of love. And that's why I always know David is the real deal, because everyone else out there who has an agenda always wants you to make a decision out of hate and out of fear. But David says, don't listen to me. Make your own choice and make a decision out of love. That's like the opposite of someone who is trying to control you. And so I always love it when he does that. And the last thing I would say is this, is really look into your own assumptions, your own education, and how you get your information and where it comes from, and just start asking yourself questions. Why do I believe anything a doctor says is true? How is the medical industry, how does it even happen? How do doctors get grants funded? What does that happen? What have I been taught since a kid that I just assume that I don't even know why that's true? Why do I believe what I believe? Do I just do it because my parents believed it, or my friends are the same political party? And just ask yourself those questions. And that usually will mean putting counter thoughts in your brain and having to grapple with them. It's funny, if you take, I think there was a study, if you take like any random selection of, say, Democrats or Republicans, they'll all have 90% of the same ideas. They'll all agree on abortion, immigration, all these things. And it's like, that's not a coincidence. It's because you're hanging out with the same people and you just kind of adopt those ideas. But most of us haven't actually gone deep in our soul and said, what do I really believe? So it's worth questioning that, because everything since we were a kid, it's this information we've got to, like I said, the doctors and the governments and the teachers and the television companies. Where do we all get it from? It's all what our heads are. And when you really start going down that hole, you have to really re-examine everything you assume to be true in the world. And then you kind of have a reckoning, and it's worth doing. And I think it's the best way to move forward. So that's the last thing I would say to people. So get the right information is what I'm trying to say. Turn off information sources that are co-opted. I stopped watching the news about 10 years ago. I canceled my cable subscription about 10 years ago. Shut off negative energy or negative information. If you're watching newspapers, their job is to freak you out every day. There's a reason they put COVID stories in there, because you click on them. So stop doing that, turn it off. And, find a great place to get your information, and then maybe spend a lot of your time offline doing other positive things. And that's what I would say to people.
That's beautiful, my friend. Socrates has said, an unexamined life is a life not worth living. And I think you just laid out some codes for living an examined life. So thank you, Brian, for taking your time. I know you're a busy guy. I know you've given various links out during the show. We'll have those in the show notes. Where are the best places for people to find you and connect in on?
Yeah, look, definitely our website, londonreal.tv, has all of our 800 plus episodes from the last 9 years. And it's got our 6 documentary films as well. We cover everything from, having billionaires on, to my recent ayahuasca experiences in Costa Rica, to, interviews with Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL. So that's all on there. freedomplatform.tv for all of our censored content is on there. And then, we're on social media, Instagram, The Real Brian Rose, and, Facebook, etc. So that's the best place to find us. YouTube as well. We are still there for now. So we'll be there at least for a little while. So that's the best place to find us. And we're here moving forward. I just want to say to you and everyone out there, I'm just super humbled by this whole experience and super grateful. And so I'm just so humbled to be trusted to be, going after and building this platform. I have the luckiest position in the world. I feel so fortunate being here. I mean, just to be honest with you, JP, London Real has given me my life back. Before I ever did this, I was drinking myself to death in a depressed state, all alone. This whole journey has allowed me to have a family and connect with people around the world. And so I am at people's service. I move forward. We grind hard every day here, but we do it because it's so fulfilling. So, I just feel super lucky to do this, and we're just going to keep doing it. And I just really think we're getting warmed up here. We're going to be doing this for a good 20 or 30 years hard. And we want to redefine the dialogue. And we really do want to, take over when it comes to this space. We believe in it. It's in our DNA. I've got a great team here of people that just work so hard to make it happen. So, thanks for your time. I appreciate your platform as well. And I respect what you do. And I was saying to one of my guys here, I was like, I wish I had had the skill set to be satirical, because I think I could have said more, you know, in those last few months with my social platforms, but I don't have that skill like you do, because I think it's a really clever way, and you know that by what you do, to really get a hard-hitting message. Let's be honest, satire can work better than, you know, 100 truths sometimes, and you do that really well. So thank you for what you do. You got great messages there. I know on the surface, people think you're this guy, but obviously you're a much deeper, thoughtful guy with a real mission underneath that. So I appreciate you, man.
Thank you for seeing me, brother. And thank you for being you. The world's a better place with you in it.
Awesome, man.